Some families sell their homes, others sell their legacy, but some sell their daughters. It sounds brutal, doesn't it? But it happened right here in New York. A city where everything has a price tag, even a life that's barely begun. And this story doesn't begin with love. It begins with a signature, a broken promise, and a pain dressed in privilege. Rose Moore was 25. Born into a world of politics and press, she was the only daughter of a once powerful senator, now crumbling under debt and disgrace. One night, she was escorted to the 57th floor penthouse of the Blackwood Tower, not as a guest, but as the final bargaining chip to salvage what was left of her family's name. And the man waiting for her? Jack Blackwood? The most feared financial mogul in the city. A man no one dared defy. No one really knew him, except for the whispers that said his heart died long ago, buried with a woman he could never forget. But this story isn't about surrender. It's about a woman who looked the devil in the eye and slowly made the monster bow. The glass doors slid open with a smooth but sterile sound. Rose stepped into the gold-accented room where every detail whispered luxury and coldness. No one had to say it. This wasn't a home. This was a chessboard, and she, just a pawn. Her father sat across from Jack, both men silent. The contract was already printed, centered perfectly on the glass table. No greetings, no small talk, only the suffocating weight of what was about to be done. Jack Blackwood stood with the grace of a man who never lost control. His suit, jet black, immaculately tailored, wasn't worn to impress, but to dominate. His dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, skimmed over her like he was inspecting a rare investment. "Miss Moore," he said flatly, "the contract is ready." Rose didn't answer. Her eyes locked on the paper in front of her, where her freedom officially ended. Her father cleared his throat, voice shaky. "Just sign it, Rose. After this, things will be different." Different, she thought. What kind of father trades his daughter for the illusion of redemption? Her voice came low but unwavering. "This isn't a marriage contract. It's a bill of sale." Something flickered in Jack's expression. A flicker of surprise? Or was it respect? But then he replied, ice in his voice. "You still have a choice, Rose. Sign it, or watch your father fall under a $40 million 0-cent debt he'll never repay." She looked at the man who used to be her hero. Now, he couldn't even meet her eyes. There was no escape. Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. The ink bled onto the paper like the death of a dream. A new life began, not out of love, but out of survival. The luxury car came to a soft stop beneath the towering Blackwood building. New York pulsed with lights and sirens, but inside Rose, everything was silent, numbingly so. The elevator glided upward in stillness. No music, just the hum of metal and the pounding of her heart. When it opened on the 57th floor, Rose stepped into another world. Bathed in warm gold light, with marble beneath her feet and walls that seemed to have never heard laughter. The penthouse was a modern palace, too beautiful to be called a home, too cold to be called hers. No one greeted her, no instructions, no comfort. A housekeeper simply nodded toward a hallway leading to her room. Inside, everything was flawless. A satin-draped king bed, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a glittering view of the city. But no photos, no books, no trace that anyone had ever truly lived there. Rose stood in the middle of the opulent space, but the only thing she felt was emptiness. She walked to the tall mirror beside the window. The woman staring back wasn't Rose Moore. The girl who once laughed freely in schoolyards or played piano in springtime light. The woman in the mirror was now Rose Blackwood, a title stitched into her skin. But deep in her eyes there was still a flicker, not of hope, of resistance. And when she heard Jack's footsteps echo down the corridor, passing slowly without pause, Rose leaned her head against the door and whispered, "You can lock me in here, but you'll never cage my soul." The first few days in the penthouse passed in silence. The schedule was precise, almost surgical. Breakfast at 7:30, dinner at 8 o'clock. Everyone lowered their eyes as she passed. No smiles, no words, as if she were invisible. Jack didn't attempt conversation. He appeared only at meals, sitting at the head of a 10-meter table, cutting his meat with icy precision. Rose, seated at the far end, kept her hands folded in her lap. She didn't touch her plate. Until one night, he broke the silence without looking at her. "Are you afraid of me?" She didn't flinch. "I'm disgusted by this. The fear comes later." A muscle in Jack's jaw twitched. Then, a faint smile, not of amusement, but of challenge. From that moment, the war began. Rose didn't scream, she didn't throw things, but each look, each word, each quiet step down the long marble halls was an act of silent rebellion. She wore dresses not selected by the housekeeper, took breakfast in other rooms, placed books at the dinner table when Jack arrived. Jack, who was used to obedience dressed as silence, began to stumble. One morning, he found her in the library, flipping through The Art of War. She didn't look up, just turned the page. "Training to be a soldier now?" he asked, voice low. "No," she said calmly, eyes on the book. "Just learning how not to lose a game I never asked to play." For the first time, Jack didn't reply. He simply stood there, watching her, like he was losing something he didn't know he still had. The library was the only place inside the penthouse where Rose still felt alive. It didn't carry the same icy luxury as the rest. The soft golden light fell gently across the dark wood shelves, creating an atmosphere that almost felt like a memory. One late afternoon, as her fingers skimmed the worn spines of the books, something caught her eye, a single item jutting out ever so slightly. It wasn't a book. It was an old, leather-bound photo album. The moment she opened it, Rose could hardly breathe. The first page held a black and white photo. A young woman, her hair dancing in the wind, laughing under the sun in Central Park. Standing behind her was a younger man, and his eyes were unmistakable. Jack. But not the Jack of now. It was a Jack from another time. Softer. Full of life. The girl in the photo was named Sophia Hart, handwritten in fading blue ink in the corner. The pages that followed were filled with warmth. Picnics, laughter, stolen kisses frozen in candid shots. A love that had once burned bright. But the final page shattered it all. A yellowed newspaper clipping, brittle with age, pressed flat, as if someone tried to keep the wound from bleeding. Tragic car accident. Ambassador's daughter dies at scene. The name of the drunk driver who fled the scene, Arthur Moore, Rose's father. The album slipped from her lap as if it had scorched her hands. Everything became clear. Why her? Why this marriage? Why Jack's gaze was always cold, always distant? She was not the woman he wanted. She was the sentence, the heir to the man who took the woman he loved. The fury rising in Rose wasn't for herself, but for the unbearable injustice of it all. And yet, underneath that fire, something else stirred. Compassion. Because within those photos, she had seen a different Jack. A Jack who once loved purely, wholeheartedly. And that truth made him no longer terrifying, but tragically human. Rose didn't sleep. The images from the album spun through her mind like a broken reel. It wasn't just shock, it was awakening. The next morning, she didn't wait for an invitation, didn't care about the schedule or the rules. She pushed open Jack's office door without knocking. He was standing by the window, staring out over the city. But when he heard the door close behind her, he didn't turn. "So you found it," Jack said, voice dry. "The album, the truth." Rose walked forward, each step heavy with fire. "You married me for revenge." He didn't deny it. "Not because of me, not because of anything I've done, but because of my father." Silence. "You don't even know me, yet you chose to punish me, as if I'm the one who killed her." Her voice didn't shake, it burned. "That's not strength, Jack, that's cowardice." For the first time, Jack turned to face her. His eyes were bloodshot, but no tears fell, only exhaustion, the kind that comes from years of keeping pain locked inside. "I didn't know what else to do with the pain," he whispered. Rose stood one step away. "You could have chosen silence. You could have chosen forgiveness. But you chose me. To be the shield, the ghost of what you lost." Jack's hands clenched. "You're stronger than I thought." She nodded. "I had to be, because I lost my freedom, my name, and I'm still here. Right in front of you." The silence between them stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Jack stepped closer, slowly, like every movement was a surrender. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not as a man in power, but as someone who's been hiding behind that power, because I didn't know how else to carry the pain." That night, New York was strangely quiet. Rose sat alone on a stone bench in the penthouse's back garden, one of the few places where the wind still whispered and the scent of trees lingered amid steel and glass. Jack's footsteps echoed softly behind her. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a full bottle of Chivas in hand. Without a word, he sat beside her, opened the bottle, and poured 2 glasses, placing them gently on the stone table. "Do you drink often?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Not usually," she said, "but tonight, maybe." They clinked their glasses. No toasts, no pretending. Just 2 bruised souls, breathing in the dark of a city that had seen too much betrayal. Jack was quiet for a long while. Then he spoke, slowly, as if each word reopened an old wound. "She, Sophia, she wasn't just my first love. She was the only place I ever felt at peace." Rose said nothing. She listened, not out of curiosity, but because every word he spoke was real. "After she died, I didn't know how to live. I stopped believing in everything." Silence wrapped around them like fog. Then Jack turned to her. His eyes were bloodshot. He leaned in and kissed her, suddenly, without warning, yet not rushed. Rose's heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but because as their lips met, she felt a tear, warm, real, fall from his face onto hers. She didn't push him away. She didn't think. That night, they didn't come together out of passion. They came together because, for the first time, they both let go of the pain. They slept together, not to forget, but to remember they were still alive. The next morning, Rose woke up alone. The white sheet still held a faint crease beside her where Jack had lain just hours before. No note, no trace of him, only her body and an odd, quiet space inside her chest. Weeks passed since that night. Neither Rose nor Jack mentioned what had happened. They moved around each other in silence, as if avoiding eye contact could make that memory vanish like mist. But inside Rose, something had shifted. The fire of resentment no longer raged. In its place grew something slower, quieter, unnamed, uncertain. And then her body began to speak. First, unusual fatigue. Then came the subtle nausea in the mornings, the strange aversion to coffee, the dizzy spells that made her sit down faster than she liked to admit. By the third wave of queasiness, the truth became harder to deny. She searched the tiny medical cupboard tucked behind the library shelves. Among bandages and cold pills, she found a pregnancy test, sealed and untouched. 30 minutes later, she sat at the edge of her bed, heart pounding, hands shaking. 2 lines, clear, unmistakable. The world paused for a moment. Rose didn't cry, didn't scream. She just sat there, palm resting on her belly. Emotions rose like waves, shock, panic, and then something unexpected. Tenderness. That evening, she waited for Jack in the sitting room. He arrived late, as usual, stopped cold when he saw her standing there, eyes steady, voice firm. "Did something happen?" he asked, cautious. Rose took a slow breath. "I'm pregnant." Silence blanketed the room like a thick curtain. "Are you sure?" "2 tests," she answered. "One this morning, one just now." Jack stepped back like searching for something to lean on. "I'm not asking anything from you," she said. "No promises, no explanations. I just thought you deserved to know." Since the day Rose told Jack she was pregnant, the atmosphere in the penthouse began to shift. No dramatics, no grand gestures. Everything moved slowly, but genuinely. Jack stopped hiding in meetings. He started coming home earlier. He didn't say much, but his actions spoke louder than any apology ever could. He went with her to the first ultrasound. He didn't speak, just held her hand as the doctor read the heartbeat. Like he was holding onto a part of himself he thought was gone forever. The penthouse, once a mausoleum of silence, began to breathe. Jack asked for lighter curtains. Fresh flowers appeared in the hall. One morning, Rose heard the scrape of paintbrushes in the empty room near the library. When she peeked inside, she found him bent over, painting the walls a soft mint green. "Baby's room," he said, not looking at her. But the smile that flickered, real and brief, was something she'd never seen on him before. That night, as they sat quietly on the couch, Jack suddenly asked, "If it's a boy, do you have a name?" Rose paused. "Luca," he said softly. "It means light." She turned to him. "Why?" Jack met her gaze. "Because before you, I didn't know darkness had an end." After that evening, when Jack softly said the name Luca into the breeze, something changed between them. No more suffocating silence, no more guarded stares, only presence. Jack began quietly doing the small things, preparing ginger tea every morning because Rose often felt nauseous, always placing a warm towel at the foot of the bed each night. No apologies, no promises, just being there, genuinely, patiently, consistently, like sunlight gradually replacing the dark. As Rose's belly grew, Jack became the first arms she leaned into when she couldn't sleep. He was the one who recorded every first kick of Luca in a small leather notebook tucked beneath his pillow. "I'm afraid I won't do this right," he once confessed while helping her apply stretch mark lotion every night. "No one does it right," she whispered, resting her head on his chest. "But you're doing something no one else ever did. You stayed." And he stayed until the very end. On the night Rose went into labor, the city below was flooded in lights and ambulance sirens. But in Jack's eyes, there was only her. Her hands trembled, her lips turned pale from the pain, but she gripped his hand tightly as if it was the only thing left she could hold on to. "I'm here," Jack said, voice hoarse. "You don't have to fight this alone." Then it came, the first cry. Luca's voice broke through the cold, sterile brightness of the room like a hymn. A tiny, fragile life was placed into Jack's arms. He looked down at the child and cried for the second time in his life. No more anger, no more ghosts, just a man holding the light he never believed he was worthy of his entire life. That morning, the New York sky was unusually clear for fall. Rose pushed the stroller through the rooftop garden, now blooming with lavender and hydrangeas Jack had replanted just for her. Jack walked beside her, no silver watch on his wrist, only his hand wrapped in hers, quiet, steady, enough. They stopped by the old stone fountain, the one that once stood as a cold centerpiece of the penthouse. "You know," Jack said, eyes on the water, "I used to think you were my punishment." Rose turned toward him, her gaze softening. "But now I understand. You weren't pain. You were the second chance I never believed I deserved." She didn't answer right away. She reached over, touching his hand. The same hand that once felt like steel, now trembling slightly under the weight of gentleness. "And you're my transformation, Jack. I'm no longer the girl sold to save a name. I'm a mother. I'm someone chosen, not handed over." They didn't kiss like a movie ending. They just leaned into each other, in silence, under the breeze, while Luca slept nearby with a quiet smile. No more vengeance, no more debt to pay. Only two people once broken, once wrong, once lost, who had chosen to rise and chosen to love anyway. Months had passed since Luca was born, and the penthouse on New York's 57th floor was no longer a place of silence or stone. It echoed with laughter, with baby babbles, with the soft patter of tiny feet, and with the voices of people who once believed they didn't deserve love. Rose often sat by the balcony trellis, where she used to stare at the city with a frozen heart. Now she sat there with Luca in her arms, and Jack would quietly drape a blanket over them, then sit beside her, like nothing needed to be said anymore. "I remember you once told me you didn't know what peace felt like," Rose whispered one afternoon. Jack looked at her. "I remember." "What about now?" she asked. He smiled, hand resting gently on her back, his eyes soft, the eyes of a man who had once fallen apart. "Now, peace has your name." Rose didn't answer. She just leaned her head against his shoulder, heart weightless. No soundtrack, no grand finale. Just a small family. A heart once broken, and love rebuilt, piece by piece, strong enough to never shatter again. And above them, the New York skyline blinked like it too had finally learned how to breathe again.